we see, as design can't really be design. It must be an illusion, or it just must be apparent design. Oops, this is not. There we go. So we talked about that when we look at things like evolution and so on, we're talking about a historical science and abductive reasoning, or reasoning to the best explanation. And so when we look, this talk is about today is actually, when we talk about the origin of the things, where we'll be like the universe or different things of the cell, we will be using abductive reasoning for that. And we want to, by abductive reasoning, we reason between competing explanations for what we see. Is the design real or an illusion, ordered or random, planned or unplanned, result of a purposeful process or a purposeless process? Basically, is the design we see is the cause of the design we see mind or mindless matter? Okay? So, and when we talk about evolution, there are different views of origins. It is commonly thought, for example, I hate this word, but Darwinian evolution this is the words I don't like, settled science. So there's nothing settled in science. Science changes a lot over time. Science evolves, changes over time, okay? But there are four main positions about evolution, if you will. One of them is intelligent design. By the way, there's a book coming out later this year called Darwin and Design, The Ongoing Debate, and it's edited by William Dembski, who is an intelligent design scientist, and Michael Ruse, who recently passed away, but he's a materialist and a Darwinian evolutionary proponent. But in the case of intelligent design, so I'm really abbreviating these positions. But design is real and detectable and infers an active designer, that the best explanation for the design we see is a mind or an active designer. And it's consistent, of course, with the God of the Bible. There's this position of theistic evolution, where design is real, but it's due to a Darwinian process. The Darwinian process still occurs, that's maintained, that occurs via the laws of nature, laws of chemistry and physics, that are maintained by God. And then there's Darwinian evolution, that design is an illusion and results from an unguided, purposeless process. This is a materialistic version. This is, I would say, the dominant view. And then there's another group of scientists that classify themselves, they've been classified as the third way. They believe that design is real and that it has a purposeful and non-Darwinian explanation, but this explanation will prove to be materialistic. So these people also are scientists who are in the materialist camp, a lot of them, but they, because of what they see in nature, they're heavily critical of the Darwinian evolution process and mechanism. So the reason I say that is to show you all these views, is to show you that Darwinian evolution is far from settled science. It's not being settled at all. And so the third way, here's a statement from them. They say neo-Darwinianism, that would be Darwinian evolution, ignores important rapid evolutionary processes, and they list some of them. Then they say, moreover, some neo-Darwinists have elevated natural selection into a unique, creative force that solves all the difficult evolutionary problems without a real empirical basis. You know, without a real empirical basis. You know what that means? Without evidence. Without what? Evidence. And many scientists today see a need for a deeper and more complete exploration of all evolutionary processes. They had a conference. Oh, it's not working again. There we go. They had a conference in 2016 at the Royal Academy in the UK, Royal Society meeting. And the purpose of that meeting was as follows. Developments in evolutionary biology and adjacent fields have produced calls for revision of the standard theory of evolution, although the issues involved remain hotly contested. Again, it's not settled science, okay? And then in 2022, there was a meeting called The Potential and Limitations of Evolutionary Processes, which I was privileged to be on the organizing committee. But in their goal, I won't read the whole statement, but the goal there was to bring people from all these four groups together to give talks. And we had maybe 20-minute talks and 45-minute discussion time after each talk. Okay, so it was heavily oriented toward discussion and give and take, and it was very interesting meeting, a very good meeting, actually, and because these issues are, as they say, hotly contested. And so I just wanted to show you that. Oops, it's still not, now it's not working again. I don't know. Okay. So now we want to look at some evidence. And first we're going to look out at the universe or cosmology. And when we look out, we'll see that the evidence shows that the universe had a beginning. That's one thing. And also that the universe is finely tuned. That things have to be just right for it to have come into existence and for it to continue to exist. So this was really a kind of a momentous discovery in terms of actual evidence. But for a long time, there was this question, is the universe infinite or is it finite? Always was and will be or began to exist, uncaused or caused. And so in philosophy and even in some scientific theories like Einstein's theory of relativity and so on, they predicted that the universe was expanding and therefore had to have a beginning, but there was no actual physical evidence for this. That came later, and a big discovery was made by this man, Edwin Hubble, who the Hubble Space Telescope is named after. And he observed and made measurements of galaxies and so on, and saw that the universe is actually expanding. He had physical evidence, observable evidence, that the universe is expanding. And therefore, if it's expanding, and if you think backwards, it had to have a beginning, okay? And if it had a beginning, it had to have a cause, right? And when we say universe, we're talking about matter, energy, space, and time. That's what the universe consists of. So it's literally, when we think of nothing, we think maybe, I'm going to go in the refrigerator and get some milk, and I pick up the milk container. There's nothing in it. Well, no, that's not what nothing means here. Nothing means absolutely nothing. No time, no space, no energy, no matter. That's all came into existence. So Robert Jastrow was an astrophysicist, and it says here, he directed the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies for a long time. And when this was during the time, when he saw this evidence that the universe had a beginning, it was quite impactful on him, and he wrote this book called God and the Astronomers. So I want you to listen to a little clip from him. It's not start. Oh, there it goes.
If you reverse the motion, the outward motions of the galaxies, and go backward in time, they come closer and closer together. And you reach a point finally where they're nearly infinite in density and temperature. And farther than that you can't go. So there is a beginning. There is a point in time from which it all started. And that's a remarkable thing because it has very strong theological flavor to it. And that intrigued me because I am an agnostic. And if there was a beginning, a moment of creation in the universe, then there was a creator. And a creator is not compatible with agnosticism. And I found that message so interesting that I felt a strong compulsion to share it with others. And so that's why I wrote that book.
Okay. Can you go to the next slide? Oh, there it is. It worked now. I don't know. But, so the argument goes, because the universe had a beginning, the argument goes that whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, and therefore the universe has a cause. And this is what was disturbing to a lot of materialistic scientists, the materialistic view of science, scientists at the time. They tried all kinds of things and are still trying to come up with positions, if you will, that the universe doesn't have a cause, that it's infinite. So they're trying to appeal to some sort of materialistic idea of infinity, and we're appealing as theists to an infinite God. All right? So here's Robert Jastrow again.
Just as I can't believe that there was a creator, I can't believe that this all happened by chance, which implies there was a creator. So you see, I'm in a completely hopeless bind, and I've stayed there. Again, I find it hard to believe that this is all a matter of atoms and molecules. And so I try to fit into my concept of the world the conclusion that there is a larger force of some kind, which we can call God, or you could call it whatever. But I can't accept that. I'm what's called a materialist in philosophy. I believe that doesn't mean I like Cadillacs and big cars. My students always used to think that. It means that I believe the world consists entirely of material substances. And when you specify those substances, the atoms and molecules, and the laws by which they interact, you've done it all. There isn't anything more to be said or inserted into your model of the universe. And that's what my science tells me. I've been a scientist all my life. But I find it unsatisfactory. In fact, it makes me uneasy. I feel I'm missing something, but it will not, I will not find out what I'm missing within my lifetime.
So we can infer some things about the cause of the universe from the properties of the universe. Okay, so one of the things that we can infer is if the cause created time and space, then the cause must be outside of time and space, or eternal, timeless, eternal. The cause must itself be causeless or self-existent. The cause must be non-material. The cause of material itself must be non-material. Perhaps we could say spiritual. The cause, of course, created the entire universe, must be extremely powerful. And the fifth, I find interesting, the cause must be a person. Persons make choices. The universe that was created was this universe out of an infinite number of possibilities. So the cause of the universe made a choice. Do those characteristics remind you of anything? Okay. In the Bible, it says, I'll just point out a couple of them. The Bible said, when Moses asked God, who should I say you are? And God said to Moses, I am who I am. That's his name, okay? And he's self-existent. I am who I am. And in Revelation, he's the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. Who is, God who is, who was, and who is to come. He's timeless. So, and of course, there's all kinds of other biblical reference to the characteristics of God that are match with the inference from the characteristics of the universe. So another thing that we discover about the universe is it's something we call it finely tuned. It says, Paul Davies said in his book, The Goldilocks Enigma there, if almost any of the basic features of the universe, from properties of atoms to the distribution of the galaxies, were different, life would very probably be impossible. And this was also written about by Hugh Ross in his book, Why the Universe is the Way It Is. So Paul Davies is not a Christian. He's an agnostic. Hugh Ross is a Christian. And what we mean by that is that there's these forces in the universe. These are the four major forces. They're called the strong and weak nuclear forces, the electromagnetic force, and the gravitational force. They have to be absolutely precise. So, for example, this is Newton's law of gravity. And that G is the gravitational constant. This is the number of that constant, the value of that constant. It has to be exactly that. If that 8 way over here were changed to a 9, life wouldn't exist. The universe wouldn't exist. If it was changed to a 7, same thing. Okay? And so there's many other things like the speed of light, the mass of a proton, the mass of an electron. They all have to be just right. That's what we call fine-tuning. So that's fine-tuning of the laws of nature, fine-tuning of those constants like G. But there's also another type of fine-tuning, and that's the fine-tuning of what are called the initial conditions for the universe. Have to be just right, like the mass that was there, the energy that was right there at the beginning, when it began. All these kinds of things, the speed at which it expanded, all that has to be just right. In fact, if any of those are changed by 1 part in 10 to the 60th power, the universe wouldn't exist. So that's what we mean by fine-tuned. This is a clip from Privileged Planet describing the fine-tuning.
During the past 40 years, scientists have determined the relative strengths of each of these primary laws and forces. These strengths are so critically balanced, they are often described as being finely tuned.
If you're to take the basic fundamental constants of nature and you were to change these even slightly, or you were to pick their values at random, you would almost never get a universe that would be habitable in any sort of way. That is, you couldn't have galaxies, you couldn't have planets, you couldn't have complex biological organisms if these fundamental constants were even slightly different, slightly stronger, slightly weaker than they actually are in this universe. That's the idea of fine-tuning.
To better appreciate this concept, imagine a machine able to control the strengths of each of the physical constants. If you changed, even slightly from its current setting, the strength of any one of these fundamental forces, such as gravity, the impact on complex life would be catastrophic.
If you increased it by a little bit, no large-scale life forms could exist. Anything that was more than the size of a pea would be completely crushed. So you might be able to get life of a very, very primitive sort, such as bacteria, but you could never get conscious observers.
This is one of a long list of properties in underlying physics that seem to be prerequisites for a universe with life. For example, the strengths of the other forces are all important, the masses of the various subatomic particles. If all of these things were even a little bit different, then life, certainly life as we know it, could not exist.
These forces and constants are another example of the correlation between life and discovery. For not only are they finely tuned for our existence, they can also be understood.
It's remarkable how well the laws work, and not only that, it's remarkable how simple they are. And that also is related to the discoverability of the laws.
Albert Einstein wrote, "I have deep faith that the principles of the universe will be both beautiful and simple." For nearly 400 years, scientists have discovered an elegant simplicity in the mathematical equations that express and unlock the laws of the cosmos.
It's been said that many of the most important theories in theoretical physics can be written on a single sheet of paper. And this, I think, ought to be considered surprising, that such a simple formula or equation could have such far-reaching applications to a very complicated and very large universe.
What you have is a universe that is not only finely tuned for life to occur, but also has a beautiful, elegant mathematical structure, and a structure such that we can discover that structure.
Most scientists just take it for granted that the world is both ordered and intelligible. And the intelligible parts I find really quite extraordinary, because it's one thing to accept that the universe is ordered, but ordered in a way that human beings are capable of understanding is an extraordinary thing. And so the question naturally arises, what is the explanation for that?
Many who have pondered this mystery of an intelligible universe argue that it cannot be easily explained away.
From naturalistic assumptions, you would not expect the universe to be understandable by human reason. After all, within the standard naturalistic story, human reason was developed to be able to hunt prey, get around in the everyday world, attract mates.
We have certain skills, for example, we can jump streams and catch falling apples and so on, which are necessary to getting by in the world. But why is it that we also have the ability to discern, for example, what's going on inside atoms or inside black holes? These are completely outside the domain of everyday experience, totally surplus to requirements, not at all necessary for good Darwinian survival.
Discoverability of the universe is something we didn't need for our existence. It's something additional to it. It seems then that whatever the source of the universe is, it intended that it contain observers who can discover.
You put observe.
Okay. So not only is it fine-tuned, as you can see from this video, but it's fine-tuned for a purpose. Paul Davies says again in his book, the universe looks as if it had been designed by an intelligent creator expressly for the purpose of spawning sentient beings. That would be us, by the way. And like porridge in the tail of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, the universe seems to be just right for life in many intriguing ways. No scientific explanation for the universe can be deemed complete unless it accounts for this appearance of judicious design. This is it's not working again, so. This is also true of Michael Denton. He was a professor of biochemistry in University of Otago in New Zealand, and he wrote in his book, Nature's Destiny, that this unique fitness of the laws of nature for life is entirely consistent with the older teleological religious concept of the cosmos as being especially designed as design whole, with life and mankind as its primary goal. So not only is it finely tuned, but it's finely tuned for a purpose, for mankind. It's finely tuned not only for mankind, but so mankind could discover things. So that's the case that they're making, which I think is intriguing. So what's the best explanation? So for being finely tuned for existence. It was finely tuned for life, finely tuned for human life, finely tuned for discovery. Fine-tuning is the result of a plan to fulfill a purpose, and we use a word to describe that the origin of the universe is teleological, okay? So now instead of looking outside, we want to look inside the cell, and we're going to be looking at things such as information, machines, and circuits. Now, what is information? That's a question. So this fellow named Bill Dembski wrote a book called No Free Lunch. Has to do with information, but he's a mathematician as well as a number of things. He's written a bunch of books. One is called The Design Inference, and he gives a criteria of defines criteria of what information is, and also how we can detect design in nature. And so one of the characteristics is that information must be complex, contingent, and specified. Now, complexity and contingency are kind of part of the same thing. And so but specificity is something else. So let's illustrate this. So let's say you have a bunch of Scrabble letters, and I blindfold you, and I say, pick out 30 Scrabble letters and line them up, and here they are, okay? They're all lined up there. And what are the possibility of repeating that? Okay, well, the possibility is the number of letters in the alphabet. That's just 26. You pick out 30, so it's 26 to the 30th power, the number of possible combinations there. That is 1 chance out of 3 times 10 to the 42. That's a big number. That's 3 followed by 42 zeros. You know, a trillion is followed by 1 followed by 12 zeros. Okay, so this is a huge number. So that defines complexity and contingency, okay? But what if I blindfolded another, I'm going to blindfold this Tim. I'm going to blindfold Tim. He's going to pick out 30 letters and line them all up, and he does that, and it comes out to this. To be or not to be, that is the question. Okay? Yeah. It would take him a long time before we got that. But let's say he did it on the first crack. Would you suspect something? Maybe there was a little bit of cheating going on there, you know? Well, that's specified. That because it has a meaning. It has a meaning. It's English language. We know that something like that comes from, what's the source of something like that? It comes from a mind, right? You can tell when you see that. So that's specified. So case 1, it's complex and contingent, but it's not specified. There's no meaning there. Okay, it's still 1 out of 3 times 10 to the 42, but there's nothing special about it. But the second one, it's complex and contingent, but it's specified. It has a meaning. So let's look inside the cell, see what we see. Here's the alphabet. It's the amino acid alphabet, okay? It has, so the G stands for glycine, P for proline. You can read them all there, okay? Now, when you make a protein, the amino acids have to be attached to one another in a line, if you will, in a precise sequence. Here's a sequence. It's just a 21 amino acid sequence, and it is, so it's a small one because most proteins are 400 amino acids long, okay? So this is how the number of possibilities, 20 amino acids, I pick out 21, so it's 20 to the 21st power, 1 chance in 2 sextillion. That's 2 followed by 27 zeros, okay? So again, it's complex and, you know, contingent and so on. But this particular sequence is not just any sequence. okay? It's part of the insulin protein. Now, insulin, that has a meaning too, doesn't it? Because if you don't have that sequence, you have diabetes, right? Because it controls glucose levels. So that has a meaning, and that meaning is determined by something else called the genetic code. So the order of what are called the nucleotide bases in the gene, there's a gene for insulin, and they determine the order of the amino acids there, okay? Just like, you know, the alphabet in the English language determined to be or not to be, but what else determined to be or not to be? A mind. So this is information too, also. It's complex, contingent, and specified. And this person who you've seen before, Francis Collins, has written this book called The Language of God. A scientist presents evidence for belief, okay? And he's the one, as I said, that determined the sequence of the human genome, all the DNA in the human being. And he also, before that, Francis Crick, when he saw the structure of it, realized that the sequence of nucleotides is a digital code. Okay, the DNA is an incredible molecule to store code in it. So he wrote this book. Okay, now we want to look a little bit at molecular machines. This again is a bacterium. That little thing sticking out is called a flagellum, and it allows the bacterium to swim through a solution. So that flagellum spins around, propels the bacterium through the solution. Now, what spins it around? It's a motor. This is the bacterial flagellum motor, a cartoon or diagram of it. It has motor parts, a rotor, a stator, bushings, universal joint, so on. It's very much like an electric motor. This is an actual atomic electron micrograph of the flagellum motor, okay? So let's see how it works. Now it's a motor like an electrical motor. An electrical motor spins because it has electrons going through it that drive it, electricity going through it that drive it. This spins not because it has electricity going through it, but it has protons going through it, okay? So a little bit different that way, but it's still interesting. But not only is it a motor, but it has to be precisely put together. So it consists of about 40 proteins that have to be put together in a precise way for this motor to work. And this is how this works here. By the way, when you show these things, I used to tell my class about when I was talking that what I'm talking to you today about and covering in 10 minutes or 15 minutes in its 15 pages in a chapter of this book took 30 years of research. Okay, so So when we talk about the fine-tuning of the universe, not only is this a machine, okay, and we kind of know what the causes of machines are, but this is also very finely tuned as well, okay? Everything has to be just right, just there at the right time, at the right place, so on for this to function. So the next machine is about how the cell produces energy, and this is a hydroelectric dam. This is a dam, and when you put a dam, water builds up above the dam, okay, and it wants to flow down the river, right? So, but we're controlling now how it flows down the river. It doesn't just flow. So what it does is it flows. We open a gate here, and it flows through and spins an electrical generator, which generates electricity. That's how it works, okay? That's how hydroelectric dam generates electricity. In the cell, we have something like this, and I want you to think this is a membrane. Think of that as the dam, okay? And instead of water above the dam, it has protons or hydrogen ions above the dam. They want to flow below the dam, but they flow through a generator called ATP synthase, okay? It makes the molecule, that's all, I'm not asking you to know a lot of biochemistry, but ATP is what you need to make that runs all your chemical reactions basically in the cell, and it brings together ADP and a phosphate and causes the phosphate to bind to ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate, and changes it to adenosine triphosphate. And this thing, this part of it here is shown here, and it spins. When the protons go through, it spins, and it causes these proteins here. So to open up, there's a site, it opens up, it grabs the ADP and P, brings them together, causes a bond to form, and then opens up again and lets the ATP out, okay? That motor, by the way, from the top to the bottom is 20 nanometers, which is 5,000 times smaller than the diameter of a human hair. That's the size of it, okay? The other thing that's interesting is that it's present in every cell in your body, and when you go through a day, you're making and using ATP because that's your fuel. That's the gasoline that runs the car, okay? And so you're making, depending on your size and so on and your activity, between 110 and 165,000 pounds of ATP are made and used every day. So 100 pounds of ATP contains 5.4 times 10 to the 25th ATP molecules. An average human being has 32 trillion cells in their body. And so every day, every cell in your body is making 1.6 trillion molecules of ATP. That's an extremely efficient generator, okay? And the exact atomic structure of every atom and every protein, you see there's all of these are different proteins, blue and yellow and gold and purple and so on, all different proteins that have to come together to form this motor. This was the complete structure, the location of every atom and every protein was determined over many years of research by Sir John Walker, who won the Nobel Prize, and rightly so, if you consider the work that was involved in how this works. And from his laboratory is this, I wanted to go back one more thing. So if you look at the the ADP is in green, phosphate is blue, ATP is kind of red, pink. So when you look at this video, when you see these little things flying around that are blue, and green and pink, that's what they are, okay? It's upside, it's flipped out, so the spinning thing is on the bottom. Again, another example of a really incredible, what we call a nano machine inside the cell, and with a huge amount of fine tuning that's required for it to make this. Okay. Now, we all recognize what this truck is. Probably comes too many times every week to our, our house. Amazon Prime truck delivering packages. In the cell, we have, and again, all I want you to understand from this is that in the cell there are many different parts of the cell. And there's mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, endoplasmic reticulum, lysosome, peroxisome, all these things. But when something is made, let's say something is made here, but it needs to function over here on the outside, or it needs to function here, or it needs, so it has to be moved. Again, it has to be a way of it getting moved to the right place at the right time. And the cell doesn't just rely on it just kind of randomly floating around and getting over there. It has a mechanism of a delivery system, okay? And so I just want you to show you that delivery system. Here, this ball is the package. It's called a vesicle. It'll contain, what's inside and deliver it to the right location. The truck is this little thing right here. It's called kinesin. It's a protein. And the highway inside the cell is a microtubule. That's this thing right here, okay? And again, after years and years of research in microscopy and biochemistry and structural biology and all these things, they put this together, this animation together to show you what it looks like. It's almost too incredible to believe, This is an extreme slow motion, by the way. The actual steps are 250 per second. Okay, so it's... And you know what the fuel is for the truck? ATP. Okay, so there. All right. So now this is circuits. So you know what this is. We all have one of these, right? So the circuit diagram for a computer motherboard looks like that, okay? And it's all integrated. One, it's telling the computer it has to know what's going on. Maybe over here, has to know what's happening over here. I mean, they're all networked together. So it's a very much what we call a kind of a system engineering project. Well, bacteria have circuits too, and all cells have circuits, but I just want to show you for, quote, a simple cell, okay, a bacterium. This is the bacterial metabolic circuit. Looks like that. Okay, so it's a whole network of different things that tell the bacteria, well, now I need to make this amount of this stuff, but over here is telling me I need this amount of material, but I don't, so it's all this communication going back and forth through these chemical networks, okay? So Francis Crick, this is his view of this. He says, biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed, but rather evolved, okay? So we can't believe our eyes, So, but that's the naturalistic viewpoint. The naturalistic viewpoint would predict that you shouldn't see things like this. But we do see things like this. But rather than follow the evidence where it leads, they want to follow the evidence to a naturalistic explanation, because that's their definition of things, okay? So that's it. So that's, in my view, what they're doing. But again, so summary, the universe. We looked at the universe. It began to exist. It's ordered, it's rational, it's intelligible, it's finely tuned, it's goal-directed. Not only goal-directed to produce sentient beings, but goal-directed for discovery. In the cell, we see information, cellular machines, metabolic networks, quality, and I didn't talk about these, but there's quality control networks, regulatory networks, developmental networks, okay, all these kinds of things in the cell. And we have this what's the better explanation? Is it real or is it an illusion? I would maintain it's real, okay? And the real explanation is a mind, and not just mindless matter coming into existence by an unguided, purposeless process. It just doesn't make rational sense to me. And I would also encourage anyone here who likes science or is interested in science, who's pursuing science, to know, again, that faith informs science, science informs faith. You don't have to choose between faith and following Christ and science, okay? It's quite the opposite, in my view, actually. So that's this. So when we talk about a mind being at the beginning, I was reminded of this part of 1 John 1, and it says, in the beginning was the Word. In Greek, that's logos, which is where we get logic from, okay? And so there was reason in logic at the beginning, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, that means the reason in logic didn't exist just on its own. It was in the person of God, okay? He was with God in the beginning. Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. Then later in verse 14, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. It's hard to imagine almost, but that's who Jesus Christ is. Jesus Christ. We say Jesus Christ is the reason for the season at Christmas. Jesus Christ is the reason for reason. He is reason, okay? So I wanted to end with this. This is actually words inscribed above the doors of the Cavendish Laboratory in Cambridge. Okay, it was put there by James Clerk Maxwell, who developed the Maxwell equations describing electromagnetism. And he was an ardent Christian, and so they've been there ever since. And they're in Latin. You can't really read them on this picture, but what they are is words from Psalm 11:2. The works of the Lord are great, studied by all who have pleasure in them. And so with that, that's the end of the talk. But next, on April 30th through May 6th, there's a documentary movie at University 16 Theaters called The Story of Everything. And if you want to see some really good presentation of ideas like this, I would really encourage you to go to that movie. We're planning on going on May 5th. May 5th at 7 p.m. And if you'd like to go on that date, then afterwards we might go to Starbucks and talk about it, okay? And answer some questions and so on. So I don't know, do you have that preview up? Okay, there's a little preview of the story of everything, so why don't you play that if you can now?
Today, I'm going to tell you a story which may seem very strange to you.
How in the world did this start?
Has the universe always been here, or is it finite?
We want to take our metaphysical hypotheses and see what they point to.
Here is evidence for what can only be described as a supernatural event.
Turned out to be the tip of the iceberg. Without guidance, we would get a life-unfriendly universe.
We're dealing with a system of manifold, complex design.
We associate information with a rational intelligence behind it.
The universe, it bears everywhere the fingerprints of its creator.
The concept of life as a cosmic phenomenon should have many consequences. The question then was, what does one do about it?
Okay. So if you have any questions about this part or the other part, I'd be happy to
Did the
try to
universe
answer
come into
them.
existence by accident?
So, whatever, but we'd really love to have you, maybe, if you're interested in this documentary, come and join us there. We'll be looking at it, and then coming over to Starbucks. Huh?
No, just because we have a coffee shop here, but the Starbucks is right there. I'm sending us to the, oh no. But
We're
it's
going
right
to-
there by the theaters, and there's enough seating there. It's one of the few places over there that has enough seating to sort of gather around and have this conversation.
Okay. Well,
In science, with creation, all that you have just shown us, do you see the story of redemption, the story of Christ?
Well, in nature itself, I don't know if we can see that from the science, but we can see the God of redemption in science. We can see that He's there, just like in that quotation from John 1. You know, I think that's who we're talking about, the God of redemption, and who Jesus Christ is. He was the Word. The whole brought all of this that we looked at today into existence, into being. And it was done for, the evidence seems to point out and suggest that it was done so that human beings would be here, that we would be here, creatures made in His image. And not only that, so that we could look at the universe and look at nature and discover His power and His beauty and His awesomeness. And so it's like Francis Crick, or like Francis Collins said in his testimony there, that when you are a Christian and you're studying science and you see something that nobody's ever seen before, but God knew it, you know, God knows it's there. It's pretty incredible. And you know, I didn't make momentous discoveries like Francis Collins, but I did see a lot of things that nobody else saw before first, you know. So it's very interesting.
As the thought just occurred to me after I had been speaking, that metamorphosis is resurrection. You know what I mean? The change, and like of a butterfly.
Oh yes, yes. So there's a really,
So I do.
yeah. So in that sense, in fact, when I was a child, my mom would read, say this is kind of how I trace my interest in science. My mom would read from a book, I can't even remember what it was, but it's a book, Stories of Nature, and how it reveals truths of the Bible. And one of them was redemption, was salvation, and the illustration of the story was that, a metamorphosis of the butterfly, of the caterpillar into the butterfly, that we become a new creature, a new creation in Christ. Yeah. So yeah, like that. Yeah, that's analogy. Huh? I don't know, but there's other things that illustrate not just caterpillars to butterflies, but tadpoles to frogs. You know, things like that. Yeah.
And kind of piggybacking off of Linda's question, something you had said earlier kind of reminded me of what the question she answered about the idea of that Romans verse that talks about how God kind of presents Himself in nature, right? Like science points us towards God, and then we learn about who God is through His Word.
Yeah.
That narrative that He has given us points us towards salvation. And how those two things really kind of, they look like two separate things, but they're kind of
No.
part of
Yeah.
Doesn't that go along with what I've heard you say? There's the book of nature.
Yeah.
And then there's the Bible.
Yeah.
The two books.
But the book of nature should lead us to God, and then hopefully that will lead us to Jesus Christ, or as we study the Word. And there have been a number of examples like that. There was a really ardent atheist named Anthony Flew that really debated I mean, he was like Richard Dawkins, he was the Richard Dawkins before Richard Dawkins, and now I'm sure there will be replacements for Richard Dawkins, but he had debates and arguing for atheism and so on. But it was this science about the universe and about what they were saying, and about information in the cell and so on, that convinced him that he was wrong. And he became a theist. Now, he didn't make it all the way to Jesus, unfortunately, but he became a theist, and he wrote a book. The title is "There Is No God," but then it had the "no" crossed out and "is" above it. There is a God. So, yeah. So it definitely can do that. I view science as one of the greatest apologetic arguments for God and who He is that there is, and because we can physically see evidence for Him, you know, and it's hard to deny. Years ago, I was at it was called God in the Academy conference. It was at Georgia Tech University. So it was a conference like this for people from different academic disciplines, not just science, but all over, gathered from countries all over the world. And in the audience, the speaker, just out of curiosity, he says, how many here are in the humanities? You know, and there would be some people raising their hands and so on. Finally got, how many here are in the sciences? 70% of the people that were there were in the sciences. So, and there's obviously there's a reason for that, you know, so.
Yeah, like what you said earlier about like how the sciences, like it seems like God wants us to find Him through the sciences. I don't know, that's powerful.
Yeah.
And like going back to when Grandma's question, like it will point us to God, and then if we trust that God's reliable as proven by science, then God said there's going to be a Savior, and so we can count that as reliable as well.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I was thinking from what he was saying in Romans 1, doesn't it also say in that chapter about, you know, that we see the visible things of God from the invisible?
Yeah.
And then it says, so they are without excuse.
There were, yeah, yes, yes, yeah.
God says, you know, you've seen it.
Yeah. So I find that particularly, actually, you know, when you see the statements of the materialistic scientists that we've read and that we saw some of the video clips of Will Provine and things like that, it's sad in a way. And even Paul Davies, who clearly is seeing this, you know, that he can't make that, he doesn't want to make that leap. Yeah, so it's yeah. So, yeah.
What you were just saying is that he sees it, but he can't accept it.
Yeah.
I liken that to abortionists.
Yeah.
They see it, they know it,
Yeah.
but their mind is so warped. That
Yeah.
They can't.
Yeah. Yeah. So. Well, thanks for coming. So we think we'll do this. You think we'll do this again sometime?
Yeah.
And
So this was our trial run. And it was